Shalom from Jerusalem. I'm Jonathan Hessen, and this is TV7's Editor's Note. And in today's edition, I'm glad to be joined by a dear friend, colleague, mentor, and a long list of other positions to include Spain's National Security Advisor, previously and currently the CEO of Worldwide Strategy, namely Dr. Rafael Bardaji. It's always a pleasure having you, sir.
The pleasure is mine, Jonathan. Thank you for having me.
It's indeed a pleasure, and unfortunately, it's not in easy times. We are seeing a lot of complexities, a very rapid pace of events taking place. We just talked about it prior to the show, how everything is rushing forward in a pace where the capacity to react to each evolving situation is quite tough, even for decision makers. Give us a little bit of an understanding. To what degree does this actually raise the level of prospects for miscalculation?
Well, there is a lot of ground to miscalculate nowadays because, we are actually in a world where different actors, it's not a bipolar world anymore, but it will become probably bipolar in the future with China and the United States, but not today. So you have to bear in mind the different actors, which are very contradictory in their agenda and their willingness and their strategic goals. So it's a kind of a multidimensional chessboard, no? That's for one thing. The second thing is that there are different maps that are overlapping. One is the energy, one is the political, one is the domestic, one is the security. So everything is a little bit contradictory nowadays. No? And I'll give you a very simple example. No? If we were to believe some of the numbers that have been given by the opposition in Iran, the regime may have killed already as many people as they are living in Greenland nowadays. But the whole attention has been in Trump trying to impose over Denmark, the accession to Greenland, and people is disregarding and forgetting completely about what is happening in Iran. No? I think our capacity to keep focused and to follow different issues at the same time has been very much reduced in the last years because of the technologies. We are used to just pass the finger and sweep and scroll and everything, so no attention whatsoever to what is happening day after day. And that's it's a dramatic situation where if you are dealing with political decision and strategic decision in the world. No? I think Iran now deserves all our attention and not to be distracted by minor issues or other kind of problems. No?
So just let's put this issue of Iran in the forefront of our discussion right now. We're talking about a popular protest that started roughly a month and a week ago, or a month and a half ago, rather, during the course of which people desperate for having an honorable way of life, able to feed their families and having enough water to drink, have gone to the streets in popular protest against a regime that has been suppressive and brutal in cracking down on any type of dissent over the last several decades, since, of course, the Islamic Revolution of 1979. Now the Ayatollah regime has started to crack down, of course, initially has tried to dissuade the public protests, and then at some point it has called in mercenaries from Afghanistan, from Pakistan, from Iraq, Hashd al-Shabi, Liwa Zainibiyun, Liwa Faytimiyun, those same organizations that it utilized also to gain the upper hand for the Assad regime at the time in Syria, are now doing its dirty work alongside the RGC and the Basij to really murder its own people with full intent to do so, which is obviously the definition, if we're talking about definitions for a moment, of genocide. So there is a genocide currently taking place in Iran with, according to the opposition, more than 33,000 murdered. Some organizations that are more robust in their Speculations are talking even about 80,000. I don't know, of course, since it's very hard to corroborate what's truly happening in Iran, which remains black. There is no internet, there is no capacity to actually understand the full extent of what's happening there. The intervals of internet are very limited. And now President Trump has put Iran on notice. He said that if you do continue to murder the Iranian people, there's going to be all hell to pay, as he put it. But it seems like the decision to strike initially a surgical strike has been called off, and the assets that are moving into the region, very significant assets from aircraft carrier strike groups all the way to entire fleets of aircraft, offensive aircraft, are alluding to the possibility of a decisive attack against the Ayatollah regime that can bring about regime change. What is your take on that?
Well, I think all options are on the table, as you used to say. No, I don't think President Trump has ruled out any military action, but there are several options, no, before a surgical strike or even a more intense campaign, as we saw months ago. No, I think if you look at the Venezuela example, things started first with a kind of naval blockade, and all the assets that are going or are already in the region make me think that that may be the case. First of all, try to economically strangle the regime, no? And accelerate their demise or collapse. And then we will see if there are other actions to be taken if the Ayatollahs still keep firing at their own populations. What strikes to me is this kind of morally abhorrent situation where the media in the West today is saying, hey, well, all the figures that are given by the opposition should be taken with precautionary notes because we don't know. But nothing of that happened when the Ministry of Health from the Hamas provide the figures. No? So there is this kind of different standard applied now to the Iranian people. And whatever the numbers are, they are brutal, they are massive, and that should put the regime really on suspension to everyone with a rational mind. And I think, well, thanks to President Trump, we will see an increased pressure to do something. Maybe at the end of the day, we will see some actions, and I hope that that will bring the end of the Ayatollah regime in Iran for the benefit of the people of Iran.
One of the points that I think is very important to know is that Iran happens to experience a flood of conversions into Christianity. There are thousands upon thousands of Iranians, Muslim Shiites, who have abandoned their faith in the Quran and have diverted their attention to Christianity. Those people are obviously living in the shadow, so to speak. They're not stating so publicly. There are home churches, there are grassroots activities in this regard. And the Ayatollah regime's Islamic Revolutionary Guards, a couple of years ago, has decreed Christianity and the conversion into Christianity as a national security threat that needs to be cracked down on. Now, this has been taking place for the last couple of years, and still we do see this happening. Naturally, they are exploiting the current situation also to target anyone that has done so over the years. And for Christians currently watching from all over the world, this is something that needs to be raised with your representatives, be it in the United States, in Europe, in Australia, or elsewhere. This cannot stand, and the outcry for the Iranian people needs to truly be vocal. Because, as Dr. Bardaji has mentioned, this is disastrous in an age where the attention span is just limited. People don't really stop for a moment and say, this is an issue that needs to be resolved, and it needs to be resolved now. This reality causes pressure on your governments to be limited. It does not really cause them to move to act in a certain direction, based on the morals and values that the Judeo-Christian civilization has been founded upon. Now, Dr. Bardaji, what can be done in order to ratchet up this pressure on the Ayatollah regime to halt what it's doing, and if not, go out and really bring about the aspired regime change, despite the defiant calls by, the Turks and the Saudis and the Qataris and Russia and China saying, no, please, no regime change. They obviously they don't want to see that because of the various implications that this may have.
Well, I think there are several issues that can be discussed. No? First of all, on the economic realm, I think we need to increase the pressure on the sanctions, and we need to make accountable all the companies and countries that are still making business with Iran. No? That's for sure. We need to put more pressure and turn the twist of the arms of the Ayatollah through the economic sanctions. Secondly, I think for those, particularly in Europe, which are so reliant upon international institutions, we need to bring all the leadership of Iran to the International Criminal Court, as they did with other leaders in the world, including Putin from Russia. But also in the European Union, we need to put the Revolutionary Guard as under the list of terrorist organizations, particularly after what happened in the last few weeks. So I think that's something that can be done and should be done. And if we Europeans are not doing it, it's because they lack the moral courage and their interests are, blinding them of the real situation in Iran, no? Which is a theocratic, Islamist, revolutionary regime that is oppressing their people and is threatening the whole world with bringing up to us the revolutionary Islamic revolution. Sorry. So I think that's something we cannot forget. No? There are decades of proofs piling up about the revolutionary, irresponsible, and aggressive behavior of Iran, and that has to be stopped because the regime is responsible for that.
The supporters of the Ayatollah regime, to include proxies in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Yemen, as well as other locations in the region, have been warning that in the event that the United States launches a decisive strike against the Ayatollah regime in Tehran, they too will join in defense of the Islamic Republic. This comes also or is remarked by the Hezbollah Secretary General in Lebanon, northern Israel, where we do hear that this might erupt into yet again an altercation or a high intensity conflict. I'm not sure to what degree they have the capacity to actually confront Israel. They're very weak at this moment in time. But we do also see the Houthis in Yemen, something that you, Dr. Bardaji, have mentioned time and again as a threat that needs to be dealt with, particularly when it comes to freedom of navigation in the strategic strait of Bab el-Mandeb and the adjacent waterways, the Red Sea and such. What can be done, particularly now that we're seeing once again the various vessels or commercial vessels trying to redivert their attention into the transport of goods through the strategic waterway?
Well, I think bearing in mind what happened the last 2 years in the region, we need to conclude that neither Iran nor their proxies or the surrogates in Yemen or in Lebanon or whatever are not 7 feet tall. No? They can be defeated or decimated or at least incapacitated, and their military capabilities are really undermined today thanks to particularly Israeli and American actions in the last months. No? So I wouldn't exaggerate their threat to the regional stability. Second, I think the Houthis has been relatively moderating themselves after the military actions taken by Israel and the United States, particularly Israel. So I think when you carry a bigger stick, you can impose some changes in behavior in the region. Uh, but I think one of the fear that is under the table, discussed nowadays among many capitals and experts, is the fear that Iran may be a country that could be fragmented at the end of the day if there is a regime change, and the Ayatollah regime is falling apart. But my advice to that will be the longer it takes for the regime to fall, the more probabilities are on the table that Iran could be fragmented regionally. So the sooner we end the regime, the better for the stability of the whole country united with a new face, with a new policy, and a new, let's say, coexistence with the neighborhoods in the region, from the Gulf to the Levant, and abandoning all the revolutionary ideas that have been there since Ayatollah Khamenei Khomeini first in 79, and then until Khamenei is in place. Now, I think we need to stop them to be in power in Tehran.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Now, I will point out that while there are some objections here in the region by various state actors, to include Turkey in particular, which is a neighbor of Iran, and others that are literally adjacent to that country, they are concerned because the consequences of such a spillover could have dire consequences for themselves. So we shouldn't take every piece of rhetoric out of context here. But nonetheless, we are here looking at the situation where the Ayatollah regime, the longer it persists and the longer it exists, the more devastating consequences it will have on the region and on the world. But at the same time, we do also need to keep in mind that this is a battle as part of strategic power competition, vast implications for Russia, for China, which obviously do not want to see the regime in Tehran fall. And in the event that we do see regime change there, likely, if not highly likely, we may see a shift or a pivot in that country to become more pro-Western. Is that something that is safe to say, Dr. Bardaji?
Yes, I think you have been in Iran in the last years or decades. You will see and you will agree with me that the Iranian population probably is the most pro-Western of the whole region, sincerely, and very well educated as well. So sophisticated thinking, and I think that they are really not just simply fed up, but they cannot sustain anymore the oppression and the poverty, and the suffering bring about the Ayatollah regime. But talking about the implication for the region, I think we cannot assess what is happening now in Syria with the Kurds and the Turkey policy against the Kurds unrelated completely of what's happening in Iran. No? I think there is a complex chessboard here, and also makes me think that there are many actors that believe really that the regime in Tehran is going to fall. I don't know exactly when, but it's really doomed.
I couldn't agree more. And I think also within that context, when we're talking about the regime in Damascus, operating on different levels and also committing atrocities, not only against the Kurds, which have a relatively or had a relatively potent force, but the SDF alliance, which was operating as the field force for the United States-led coalition, Operation Inherent Resolve, against the inherent defeat of the Islamic State. 60% of that used to be Bedouin, and many of those Bedouin tribes have now shifted alliances towards Damascus. We see the various Islamic State camps, or the camps that incarcerated Islamic State operatives, being either attacked or thousands actually fleeing those camps. Something that, of course, resulted in U.S. Central Command being instructed to move those prisoners into Iraq. Are we actually in a position to I wouldn't say confidently state, but to highlight at least and voice caution over the fact that we have an emergence of a potential jihadist Islamic State type of country in Syria this day?
At least what is clear is that the authority of Damascus is not full over the whole country and over the whole different factions that are now forming what which used to be Syria. No? That's one thing. Second thing is, okay, there have been some skeptical voices about the nature, the real nature of the leadership in Damascus as well, no? With a past linked to Islamist pro-Al-Qaeda groups, whether it was really transformed or just a kind of ship with a wolf with the skin of sheep over it. No? The situation is confused and confusing, actually, to say the least. But I think the US at least, also France and the UK, has been acting militarily against specific ISIS targets in Syria. And I think the Islamic State has to be under scrutiny and control and be destroyed with military actions. But we still don't know exactly where Damascus government is going, no? And even if it's in the right direction, whether it has the capability to impose its authority over the whole country, no? So that's why also I think Israel has to be very vigilant because in the border, well, there may be some clashes and some threats coming out of Syria, no?
Absolutely. Well, I'm among those skeptics, to put things
I know.
out there. And naturally, when we're talking about southern Syria, Israel needs to be extremely vigilant. When we're talking about Turkey being involved in Syria, I think we also need to take into account that Ankara wants Damascus to succeed. It sees it as a very significant project in order to salvage its own economy. Now, it sees itself as a restraining force to those jihadists who are clearly not reformed. We are seeing the atrocities committed and the signs of jihadism and Islamism deeply rooted within the institutions that are being formed by the Damascus regime. But nonetheless, in order to make this a success story, Ankara needs to convince the West that the problem may also be the solution, because nobody wants to see a new war rage throughout Syria, since European nations obviously want to see all the Syrian refugees, supposed refugees, being sent back to Syria. Not only European nations, but also other countries around the world that absorb those people. And they are willing to turn a blind eye to some of those atrocities taking place to make that happen, to avoid atrocities in their own country at some point. And then we're also seeing other complexities related to the potential implications of what you mentioned, the Iranian issue, where Syria could find itself in a clash with its neighbor Iraq, which is something that is now we're hearing more and more about, rhetoric coming out of Baghdad as well as Damascus, and this doesn't seem to be on the right trajectory.
Well, you're right to point out that at least in Europe and also in the US, to some extent, the threat posed by Islamist group and jihadist group, including the Islamic State, has grown in the last years. And even if we thought in 3 or 4 years ago that there was a diminishing threat, now it's back. It's back because of the people infiltrating through illegal immigration channels into the European continent. And we are seeing again resurfacing some of the traditional attacks of ramming people, attacking and snapping people in the streets. No? So I think the Syria security threat to Europeans is real, and that's something to be considered. No? And that's why stability in the country is so important for Europeans. Having said that, as you mentioned, there are some contradictions here, and we cannot accept any violence against minorities, as we saw weeks ago, no, in the south. I think that's something we need to clarify ourselves, and what kind of realism and pragmatism can we apply for the good, not just to content ourselves saying, okay, in acting like this, we are just building a wall against Islamist and jihadist terrorists coming to Europe, no, because that's not true. I think we need to defeat them there and to fight them here in Europe when those who are already among us, no.
Governments have a responsibility to their own people, first and foremost. And in order to protect their people from all of the atrocious savagery that exists in other countries, they need to protect their own borders. And that is something that the majority of governments in the world, particularly in the Western world, have been neglecting. And it is I can't call it anything less than strategic negligence and a crime to their own people. And that is something that, unfortunately, is still not being dealt with in all countries. I do see the better situation now in the United States, a couple of European countries trying to enforce their borders somewhat better. But you see the results countries like Sweden announcing that the state has lost the exclusivity over violence. The monopoly over violence is something that a state controls through its military and police. That is not something that we're seeing in Sweden today. Other countries are also quickly following. In 1 minute, what needs to be done in order to make a drastic shift that could salvage some of those countries that have had leaders who really, in a criminal way, have neglected the security of their own people?
Well, I think we need to pay attention to what President Trump is saying about Europe's future. No, we are in a course of what he said, civilizational erasure, and that's true. I think through totally ungoverned and uncontrolled immigration, we are transforming the social landscape in all the countries in Europe. No? From Spain to Sweden, there is the same pattern. When you reach a certain amount of Muslim population, they will try to take the public space more than the private sphere, no? And they will impose and they try to impose their values over our traditional historical values, and that's something that has to be solved. No? Unfortunately, the left and the traditional and the legacy conservative in Europe are not aware, or they are using the immigration for different purposes. I only have to remind that the open doors European Union policy was brought about by Angela Merkel. No? So we need to be very careful, and I think we need to rethink entirely our security of our borders, our immigration policy, and our integration policy of the people. If they don't want to be living peacefully with us, they shouldn't be here, sincerely. I think we need to put in place the mechanism to bring them to their home. No?
Well, there's much still to talk about. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of our time today. So I'd like to thank Dr. Rafael Bardaji for all of your valuable insight and the points raised. We have to wait and see, of course, also where are things heading vis-a-vis Iran. Nobody knows whether President Trump has indeed the intention of following through on his warnings. But yet again, thank you, Dr. Bardaji.
Thanks to you, Jonathan. Thank you.
And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom. Israel has launched operations
on Vladimir Putin.
helping Iran develop. We have logic, we have rationale, we understand how the system operates.